Hi, let's take a look at the levels within FabuLingua. If you've already been playing around with the app, or perhaps you've taken a good look at the website, then you might be familiar with these levels and you can skip this video. Otherwise, if you'd like a deeper understanding of how the levels can work within a classroom setting, then listen on. First, let's look at the layout of the app. In an educational setting, there are many stories that come unlocked available to you. And as you can see here, each of these graphics are a different story, just absolutely beautiful. One of my favorite parts of FabuLingua are the artistic graphics. So within each of these stories are 4 levels where the students will receive the language, they'll practice it, they'll apply it, they can get interactive with it, and depending on their age or level of literacy, demonstrate mastery of reading it. And let's look at what these levels look like up close. All right, so we have this little layout right here. And when a student clicks on a story, in this case, it is Las Hadas, that's the story, then these 4 levels will come not in color. It will be grayed and or the color gray. So they'll go from, once they finish the first level, this one will brighten up with color, and then the next one, and so on and so forth until they complete the whole path. So the first one is called Magical Translations. In Magical Translations, you see they will be hearing the Spanish, it will be read in phrases and then translated within that phrase. And you see the finger here where they can touch to hear a word after the entire sentence or sentences has been read. They can go back and touch any word, and it is interactive. So there are lots of pictures and animations that can be touched. They're like mini games within it that will animate and reinforce, reuse, and even extend the vocabulary. So as I mentioned, they can go back and understand each and every single word, and that's available at every level. So the next level that would happen here is the copycat. And the story is still read phrase by phrase. And instead of hearing the translation, you will click the record button and record yourself reading or speaking, repeating whatever the child is at as far as literacy. They would be recording just that phrase. Then at the end of the page, the story will put together those recordings, and your child, the student, would be reading it. The next level is called Spanish Only, and instead of it being read and then translated, it is read and no translations. Now, the click to touch is still available, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but if a child is needing to click to touch on every one of those words to understand, then they're probably not quite ready for this, and they can go back. And that's a bit self-monitoring because they will just not get as much enjoyment out of it. But that is available for them to understand, and all of the interactive options are still available. The difference is they're not hearing the translations all throughout the page. So once this one is done, then they would move on to the read by myself. Now, before we do that one, let me talk just a moment about how I would lay this out in the classroom. This will depend on how many devices you have available to you. I would say if you have 2 children for every device, or 1 device for every 2 children, then what I would do is have the children in partnerships, and they will each have their own accounts, and they would perform whatever it is they're going to do in FabuLingua. Say it's the Rani Sapi's story with on the magical translations. They would sign in under one person's account, student A, and that student A would be the leader of that round. Now, student B could still be doing some touching, the repeating, they would still be doing it together, but student A is the leader and gets to decide when to turn the page, how many times to make the paper airplane fly, and things like that. Then when they get to the end, they sign out of student A's account, sign in with student B's account, and now student B is leader. If you're using the monitoring system to measure their progress, then this will allow you to see how far each student has gone. Now, when that particular student A and B are together, they will have gone the same length, most likely. Whereas student C and D might be getting further, and that's perfectly fine. Later, student B and student D might be together and they're doing some other things. But what that allows you to do is track the progress for each student and still have them be paired up. Now, if you have a device for every child, that's great. Although personally, I like to do the peer partnering because there's some comfort in that, no, peer learning, but of course you pick whatever works for you in your classroom. All right, let's look back at the levels again, and we'll get to this last one called Read by Myself. And in this one, it's similar to the copycat, similar to the Spanish only. They are seeing the words, they're not hearing them, and it's not being read for them. So they see the page, it's a very familiar environment. They have the words available to them, and then they click record and read that page. Now, I use quotes because if you're working with kindergartners, first graders, you might have a large number of your group that are not actually reading that. They might be doing it on their own strong memory. They might be pulling language that's not totally exact or grammatically correct, and that's okay. Really, the decision to use this level in your environment will depend very much on the age and literacy level of your students. And perhaps some students might have a really strong memory recall and they may not be reading the words at all. They might just remember what it says. If you find that appropriate, then by all means, you make it available. I would make it available, but I would not push it as a requirement until I get to an age where that literacy level really matches and they can use those words as a support and actually read them. To recap that, I would make it available. I would encourage it for those who would benefit from it, but I would not require it. Now, I would be checking in, and I'll explain how I'll do that in a later video, but I will be checking in one-on-one with these students and partnerships to get a good idea of who might be a good candidate who might benefit from using the Read by Myself. And I would really either encourage them or even just assign it. And that way it's not just across the board being required by everybody or for everybody, but also not across the board, not required, so that those who could use it would get a benefit from it. So those are the levels. We've got the magical translations, the copycat, the Spanish only, and the Read by Myself within every single story that's available.